This is an exemplar answer to question 6, Cambridge International A Level Economics, paper 4-2, February-March 2021, essay question on full employment and equilibrium. The question is: explain why an economy might be in equilibrium at less than a full employment level of output, and critically evaluate alternative policy measures which might be used to move the economy to a full employment level of output. 25 marks. The question has two parts. Part 1. Explain why an economy might be in equilibrium at less than a full employment level of output. Part 2. Critically evaluate alternative policy measures which might be used to move the economy to a full employment level of output. The first part of the question. Explain why an economy might be in equilibrium at less than a full employment level of output. For the first part of the question, there are three components. Firstly, define equilibrium, and briefly explain how equilibrium is determined. Next, meaning of full employment level of output. Then, we answer the first part of the question. Why an economy might be in equilibrium at less than a full employment level of output. This is supported by analyzed diagram. The first part of the question is as follows. Equilibrium means stability of the gross domestic product, GDP, or national income. That is to say, there is no tendency for the national output or income to change. Equilibrium occurs when the aggregate expenditure is equal to output in the economy. Aggregate expenditure is the total spending at various income levels, and it is the sum of consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. It can, therefore, be expressed as Y equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Full employment level of output is the output level at which there is maximum use of an economy's resources. At full employment, all resources of land, labor, capital, and enterprise are fully utilized. A graph showing equilibrium and full employment. An economy might be at equilibrium below the full employment level of output if the total demand is less than what can be met by the available resources in the economy. In the diagram above, aggregate expenditure is less than the potential output of the economy, which causes the equilibrium level, YE, to be below the full employment level, YF. This may be caused by a rise in interest rate, which reduces consumption and investment, and total expenditure in the economy. This means there is spare capacity as some resources are not used, e.g. during a recession. This results in deflationary gap. Deflationary gap, the distance AB in the diagram, is caused by the divergence between equilibrium and full employment. Deflationary gap would lead to a fall in the general price level. The second part of the question. Critically evaluate alternative policy measures, which might be used to move the economy to a full employment level of output. We will tackle the second part of the question as follows. First policy to move economy to full employment, one paragraph. Why the first policy may not be effective, another paragraph, ideally. Second policy to move economy to full employment, one paragraph. Why the second policy may not be effective, another paragraph. A graph showing government intervention. For the second part of the question. State policy 1 and explain how it moves the economy to full employment. It is written as follows. The use of expansionary fiscal policy will move the equilibrium to the full employment output level. This involves reducing the tax rate and increasing government spending. Reducing tax rate increases disposable income for consumption. It also increases the profits that businesses can use for investment. Rising consumption, investment, and government spending will boost aggregate expenditure and move the economy's equilibrium to full employment level. In the diagram above, increase in government spending raises the aggregate expenditure from AE1 to AE2 and brings equilibrium to YF, the full employment level of output, thereby eliminating the deflationary gap. Why Policy 1 may not be effective. State the reason and explain why it will not move the economy to full employment. The paragraph is as follows. However, expansionary fiscal policy may lead to budget deficit, which may be financed by borrowing. The government may crowd out the private sector due to its fiscal policy intervention. When the government borrows to finance budget deficit, interest rate rises, making it difficult for the private sector to borrow for the expansion of consumption and investment. Consequently, aggregate expenditure fails to rise and move the economy to full employment level of output. Policy 2 is analyzed as follows. Alternatively, interest rate, a monetary policy, could be used to bring equilibrium to full employment or potential output. The central bank reduces the bank rate that influences the interest rates charged by banks in the country. Cost of borrowing, as a result, is reduced, thereby encouraging more borrowing by households and businesses. Consumption and investment increase. Aggregate expenditure also rises, moving the economy to full employment level of output. Why Policy 2 may not be effective. However, lowering interest rate may not have any significant effect on aggregate expenditure if interest rate is already very low or close to 0%. This situation is known as liquidity trap. Low-interest countries would have to resort to the purchase of securities. When the central bank buys securities, more money is available to banks to give out as loans and increase aggregate expenditure. This unconventional policy is called quantitative easing. The last paragraph is a reasoned conclusion. State your opinion. Support it with another point. Do not forget, it depends on using the short run and long run. Also, state the impact. This is the conclusion. In conclusion, government policy intervention may fail to move the economy to full employment level of output. The budget deficit caused by expansionary fiscal policy may increase the national debt and reduce the ability to finance infrastructure. This reduces investment and aggregate expenditure. In addition, it is usually temporary and unavoidable for an economy to achieve equilibrium below the full employment of resources. This is because economies usually operate below full employment of resources in the short run. Market forces would automatically bring equilibrium to full employment level in the long run, because businesses will explore the spare capacity due to the profit motive. Therefore, intervention by the government may be unnecessary and may end up creating additional problems such as conflict of objectives. The whole essay, putting all together. This is the first paragraph. The graph showing equilibrium and full employment. The body. The graph showing government intervention. The body. The body. The body. The body. The conclusion.